But now, I have the great pleasure of introducing someone I've known for a long time. He's formerly the mayor of Lexington, where he steered that city's financial ship through a few challenges. Would you say, Jim Gray? In 2019, Jim Gray was appointed by Governor Beshear as the Secretary of the Transportation Cabinet. He's overseen such projects as the emergency repair of the Brent Spence Bridge over the Ohio River. And that was a 6-week, is that right? 6-week repair job? 4 weeks? Well, 4 weeks. So, that's pretty remarkable. And I know a little bit about bridge repairs, and I don't think I've ever seen one done that quickly. But he's quite capable and has faced his own challenges there at the Transportation Cabinet. He has a BA from Vanderbilt University, and then he came home to help grow his family's construction firm, Gray Construction. He's very involved in the EV network, EV infrastructure that is coming to Kentucky. His cabinet was largely responsible, along with a little bit of input from us, of the EV network that was filed with the federal government, accepted and approved by the federal government, which means we're well on our way. One of my water engineers yesterday made a comment about how well we work with Transportation Cabinet, and I think he said something to the effect that you can get to from point A to point B without a road, but you can't get there without drinking and going to the potty. So that's the interplay of our two cabinets together. But having said all that, let me just have you welcome Secretary Jim Gray.
Well, thank you, Secretary Goodman. Sometimes I fail to give all the honorariums, and I would just say thank you, Becky, because as she said, we've known each other for a little while. And I loved your sharing not just the agenda of what you all have got going on today, but also everything that's going on in the cabinet. And you guys have a lot going on. It never fails to impress me. And I was going to say too that it's it's sort of cliche to say it's a great pleasure or it's an honor to work with somebody. But when I say that about Becky Goodman, I mean it. She is on top of things, and she is collaborative. The good news too is she's a really good friend of the governor's. So if you need advice on something, you go to Becky Goodman. She was also at the Transportation Cabinet as our general counsel, so she knows probably more about the Transportation Cabinet than I've learned, or she's forgotten more than I will know in the last 2 years. That's a tribute to her as well. But I think one of the best tributes to the governor's cabinet today came from John Hicks, who is today the Secretary of the Cabinet, and he's also, of course, the State Budget Director. And John has been around not just Kentucky state government for years, for a couple of lifetimes, but he's also very familiar through his networks at the federal level and other states. He's really familiar with what other states do and the way in which the states engage their work, the operations of the states. And he said not long ago in a cabinet meeting, and I don't think he was just being solicitous or gratuitous to us, because John said that this cabinet, this governor's cabinet, and this governor are the most collaborative and the most effective of any that he's seen in his career. And I'm not saying, as I said, I'm not saying that to be solicitous to ourselves. I'm saying that because I think you all who are in the cabinet and related to this work, and also those in the private sector and otherwise, and other agencies, it's important to know that your leadership is working together and that they are connecting. And that's a big deal. Coming from the private sector myself, I know a little bit about what it's like to create a business and a company where you've got that kind of environment, where people are actually working together as a team and recognizing that there is no I in teamwork. So I wanted to share that because Becky Goodman, Secretary Goodman, is a big part of that. Okay, so it is a pleasure, as I said, being cliche, it is a pleasure being with you all this morning. And my compliments to the entire staff who has put together this conference. The issues that you're discussing touch the lives of every single Kentuckian. I'm going to speak just a little bit about the full context. I'm going to get to EVs. And Paulette is here, and she is the timekeeper. And if you all see her raise a big flag here, that means I'm going to start speaking really quickly, because she knows that I've got something like 20 minutes. I don't want to exhaust you, but I do want to talk about these things. But first is the context. What's the Transportation Cabinet? What's its role in these issues? Well, first let's talk extreme weather and climate change. Consider the environment, which of course comprises many things, of course, including the weather. Since Secretary Goodman and I joined Governor Beshear's team, extreme weather has become nearly routine. Senator Jimmy Higdon, who's chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, has taken to calling the Transportation Cabinet the masters of disaster. The cabinet itself has had to respond to one weather disaster after another. And most recently, of course, the catastrophic flooding in eastern Kentucky, which so far has caused 43 deaths with one person still missing. And last December, the tornado in western Kentucky, which killed 80 Kentuckians. Those disasters on top of other more localized but still severe flooding events. Destructive snow and ice storms that last winter came back to back. And extreme heat that takes its own kind of toll on our transportation infrastructure. These extreme weather events affect all of us. Too often they have an enormous reach. A hurricane makes landfall on the Gulf Coast, for example, and people drown in the Northeast as a result. The effects of the December tornadoes and now the flood of this past July were felt across our entire state and will continue to be felt for a very long time, because the effort required to recover from such extreme weather events is too much for local governments to handle by themselves. It takes the state and federal governments, which means that all of us, no matter how far removed we might be, we share in the cost and the work. Now let me take just a moment to tell you how proud I am of the vital role the Transportation Cabinet has played in the response to the tornadoes and the flood. And let me be also quick to add that the Energy and Environment Cabinet as a whole has stood shoulder to shoulder with us on the flood response and recovery effort. Right now, for example, both of our cabinets are deeply involved in the task of cleaning up flood debris from roadsides and waterways, finding appropriate sites for its disposal, and sites for new housing. I sometimes say that the Transportation Cabinet is the logistics and operations backbone of state government. Our crews not only work to clear and repair damaged roadways, they are the first of the first responders. They have to clear the roads before the first responders can even do their work. But in the case of the tornadoes and the floods, we also hauled and installed travel trailers for use as temporary emergency shelters. We transported equipment, water, food, cots, whatever was needed. In the recent flood, every department and division and highway district was involved in the response effort. More than 300 of our Department of Highways employees from across the state actually came to the most impacted counties in eastern Kentucky to work. And convoys of equipment, more than 300 pieces of equipment throughout the state were brought in. A number of our employees lost their homes, and some lost virtually everything they owned in both western and eastern Kentucky. And yet they were back at work nearly immediately. So I couldn't be prouder. But today I want to also update you on some important forward-looking issues where the Transportation Cabinet is involved, especially the rise of electric vehicles and other alternative fuel vehicles. But let me put it all in context. And first, a bit of my own experience. 3 years ago, I was cautious to confess 3 years ago that I had acquired an electric vehicle. And the reason I was cautious to confess it was because, of course, being the Transportation Secretary, recognizing that our funding in transportation comes from the gasoline tax, I was a little bit hesitant, just a little bit hesitant to drive that electric vehicle into the Transportation Cabinet parking structure. I got a little bit more comfortable and confident with it over time because it's obviously become more popular, more important. And in fact, I got to the point of going to committee hearings, the legislature, last year, and saying, you know, you all shouldn't let me get away with this. You should not let me get away with this. I'm not paying any taxes whatsoever on driving this vehicle that does just as much impact, has just as much impact on these roads as a gasoline-fueled vehicle. So where are we today? The private sector is leading the way, but Kentucky is part of that wave, and I want to explain. Mercedes-Benz and Volvo have already announced they will quit making gas-powered vehicles and become totally electric by 2030, 8 years away. And that's 5 years ahead of the California plan. As I'm sure you know, all the other major automakers are joining in the trend by offering alternative fuel models, especially electric vehicles, EVs. These vehicles are no longer restricted to a few brands with unusual names like Tesla and Volt. EVs are on the rise even among some brands historically identified with performance and not fuel efficiency, brands like Mustang and Cadillac, Ford F-150 and Hummer. In a report earlier this year, the New York Times said rapid growth of EV sales could make 2022 the year when the march of battery-powered cars became unstoppable. This has big implications for us in transportation because of the way we historically have funded transportation projects, what I just described, which is to say in large part through a tax on sales of motor fuels, of gasoline. That too, of course, will require change. And we at the Transportation Cabinet and the governor had some hope for reform of the funding formula in each of the last couple of legislative sessions. We haven't gotten it yet, but as you all know, if at first you don't succeed, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again. We've got to make changes. And Kentucky is on the leading wave. Kentucky is not sitting idly by. As many at this conference already know, Kentucky has emerged as the nation's leader in the EV revolution. Under Governor Beshear's leadership, Kentucky has attracted more than $9 billion of investments. And just to put that in perspective, Toyota was an $800 million investment 27 years ago. Total plant and equipment. I was on that job site, and I knew what was going on then. It was a big, big, big deal. $800 million today, that $800 million today in present dollars is about $2.3 billion. The Ford plant alone is almost 3 times that. The Envision plant on top of it adds another $2.5 billion. That's where the $9 billion is coming from. Those $9 billion, that $9 billion of investments from EV battery makers and automotive suppliers. So we are quickly becoming the EV battery production capital of the nation, creating thousands of high-quality jobs in the process. Now, as for electric vehicles themselves, the Federal Highway Administration has approved, as Becky said, our plan to develop an EV charging network. Our development plan outlines a number of high-priority EV corridors. And here again, Secretary Goodman and her cabinet are standing shoulder to shoulder with us. Development of the plan has been a cooperative effort of the Transportation Cabinet, the Energy and Environment Cabinet, Public Service Commission, Federal Highway Administration, and with input from hundreds of other agencies, organizations, and interested parties. The plan was submitted to the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation in late July, and shortly thereafter we got official word that it was approved. That was just a month ago. That approval secures nearly $70 million in federal formula funds under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. With matching funds, it will be a total of $87 million over 5 years. I said NEVI, it's NEVI, right, Becky? Yep, thank you. Federal Highways also approved our plan for development of alternative fuel corridors to enable usage of vehicles that run on a number of fuels other than gasoline or diesel. That fuel may primarily be electricity, but it also will include hydrogen, propane, natural gas, and the like. As for EVs specifically, our infrastructure deployment plan envisions a reliable, accessible, convenient, and affordable charging network. It's a network that supports transportation choices, energy diversification, economic development, and environmental sustainability. The NEVI funds must first be used to build out the designated alternative fuels corridor, which include all 11 of our interstates and our 8 parkways. It likely will take 2 to 3 years. Our goal is to have a statewide network by 2025. That's just 3 years from now. So it's a quick install. The initial charging stations are required to be DCFC, which stands, of course, for direct current fast charging stations. These are the so-called level 3 chargers, 4 chargers per station. They have to be no more than 50 miles apart, and the specific locations will be coming later. 50 miles apart and no more than 1 mile off of the roadway, the interstate or the parkways. The idea is to ensure that every corner of the state can be reached with this DCFC network. After we build out the interstates and parkways, we will continue building out on other priority roadways. Now, electric vehicles seem to get most of the attention, and you're going to hear more about this. But Kentucky also is involved, of course, in advancing a market for hydrogen fuel vehicles. Last month, Governor Beshear announced he was joining 6 of his fellow governors in creating a Midwest hydrogen coalition. The other states, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. In making the announcement, the governor cited Kentucky's extensive freight and pipeline networks and underground storage areas. That gives us the energy infrastructure to support, enhance, or expand hydrogen production and distribution and hydrogen-fueled vehicles. We also have a chemical and manufacturing base and a leadership role in logistics and automotive manufacturing. Hydrogen is a clean burning fuel that can be produced through fossil, nuclear, or renewable sources. And it's also one component of Kentucky's energy strategy, as Secretary Goodman and others can tell you. Many of you know that Toyota has been especially active in producing hydrogen vehicles. And in fact, we had a couple of their vehicles on display this summer outside the Transportation Cabinet Office building in Frankfort. Last year, again, as many of you know, and as Becky just mentioned a few minutes ago, Toyota Motor Manufacturing Kentucky announced it was investing $461 million in its Georgetown plant. And next year, the Georgetown plant will begin assembling the fuel cell modules that are used in hydrogen-powered, heavy-duty commercial trucks. So let me finish by saying, and Paulette, have you given me that sign yet? I didn't see it. Oh, that's my fault. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, I'm almost there. I'm wrapping it up, actually. The automotive industry is undergoing, of course, fundamental change. I describe it as revolutionary. That New York Times report I mentioned earlier called it the biggest upheaval since Henry Ford introduced the Model T in 1908. And it's so true. It's a fundamental change in more ways than just people choosing a different type of vehicle to drive. It will mean a mass rebuilding and refitting, retrofitting of factories, a mass retraining of workers, a reinvention of dealerships. It will also mean, perhaps far in the future, but maybe sooner than we expect, the disappearance of businesses that make mufflers or fuel injectors and a myriad of other parts associated with internal combustion engines. What opportunities are going to be created in their place? These are the questions. Who is going to build and service and supply the vehicles of the future? I think the answer is those who are riding the leading wave. We want to make certain Kentucky is among them. And it is gratifying to know. It's gratifying, in my view, to know. Since I was there about 25 years ago when Toyota came here, it's gratifying to know that we have the leadership today in Kentucky, across the board, public sector and private sector, that is recognizing this trend and has gotten on board. Thank you all very much. Great to be with you here today, and this agenda looks great.